This is gonna be weirder than usual.
Control was one of the best action games of last gen, a prime example of developer Remedy's talent for creating addicting combat in captivating worlds. Unfortunately for those who played on console, they had to settle for a version that didn't show the full visual potential of the game. But now with the release of next-gen hardware comes Control Ultimate Edition, which aims to let console fans experience the game as it was intended, in its full ray-traced glory. Does this version deserve to be on your shiny new weird-looking gaming box, or should it be sealed away from prying eyes? What's up everybody, I'm Kirk, and today we are flying into Control Ultimate Edition for the PlayStation 5. But before all that, please be sure to subscribe to this channel for more videos about otherworldly beings that need to be shot. Alrighty, let's begin. Developed by Remedy Entertainment and published by 505 Games, Control was initially released in 2019 for the PC, PS4, and Xbox One, and marked Remedy's first multi-platform release in almost a decade, as their previous two projects were developed exclusively for Microsoft. Control Ultimate Edition is essentially a repackaging of the original game and its two DLC chapters, the Foundation and AWE. Ultimate Edition also allows console players to experience some of the graphical awesomeness that was previously enjoyed only by those with the highest of high-end PCs. But before we get into this review, I need to give you all a heads up on some unpleasantness with this edition. Once again, Control Ultimate Edition is a repackaging of the game and its additional content, the only difference being the graphical updates, which were already available in the PC version. There is nothing new here. I stress this because if you happen to be someone who bought the base Control game on a last-gen console, like PlayStation 4, and purchased all the DLC separately or through Season Pass, you cannot update that version of the game to the PS5 version. You either have to purchase the Ultimate Edition on PS5 or purchase the Ultimate Edition on PS4 and update that. Either way, if you're a current Control owner on last-gen hardware, you have to repurchase the game to enjoy next-gen enhancements. Yeah. This has understandably upset a lot of fans, particularly because many publishers are offering PS5 upgrades for their games for free. 505 has stated this is because of technical issues. Many have cried bullshit, me being one of them. I do not buy for 1 second there wasn't some solution to whatever technical issue this might have caused to honor the players who initially supported your game. I say this with my PS5 copy of Hitman 3 in mind. This is clearly a financial decision, don't act like it isn't. This whole thing doesn't affect my opinion of the game, rather my opinion of the publisher. I do appreciate them releasing the game through PlayStation Plus, that's how I got this copy, but even that move served to piss off some players who had already pre-ordered the game. It's a mess all around and it could have been avoided. Obviously, if you've never played Control before, this doesn't affect you, but anybody who already owns Control and wants it for their new next-gen console, be aware of this. Alright, enough with that. On with the review. In the universe of Control, the paranormal is a reality, but not in the way you'd think. Ghosts, possessions, werewolves, superhuman abilities, these are not born from death, demons, curses, or unfortunate freak accidents, but rather meddling from other dimensions, in particular, the astral plane. Such meddling is a top concern of the United States government, so much so that they established a secret bureau to handle all matters of the supernatural, the FBC, Federal Bureau of Control. The FBC is located in the center of New York City, within the oldest house, a living building able to bend the laws of physics to transform itself, sensitive and reactive to all that inhabit it, for good and bad. Among the many things the FBC studies, their primary concerns are AWEs, altered world events, strange and often dangerous phenomenon directly caused by the astral plane and our own collective unconscious.
I'm here. Why did you bring me here?
You play as Jessie Faden, a child victim of an AWE that resulted in her brother being taken by the FBC. Now as an adult, Jessie has come to the oldest house to save her sibling, but what starts as a rescue mission quickly turns into the start of a new career.
Shit.
Jesse finds the cold body of the FBC director, and upon picking up his service weapon, unknowingly accepts the offer to take his place. Now the new director of the FBC, she must follow the orders of the mysterious board that hired her, and cleanse this supernatural citadel of the invaders that plague it, the Hiss, all while trying to find the sibling she lost so many years ago.
And this gun's alive. You know what? I'm happy. Happy to be here.
Control is a strange game. Strange, but fascinating. I remember the first time I played it, being very unnerved by it. At times it feels like you're in a horror story, walking the spooky halls of the oldest house, listening to the chanting of floating contorted bodies, and fighting demonic-looking enemies. But then the next moment you're reading about a rubber duck that tormented people, or walking into an office covered in sticky notes. It can be pretty random. The oldest house is probably best described as half haunted mansion, half funhouse. And I think the only thing stranger than the oldest house itself is the fact that normal, squeaky clean government employees work within it. H.P. Lovecraft and the SCP Foundation are clear inspirations for the game, but you could make the argument that Control is a sort of modern-day retelling of Alice in Wonderland, and this is a deep, deep rabbit hole indeed.
Federal Bureau of Control. All these years I've been looking for them, and they were hiding in plain sight.
Like Remedy's past games, much of the story is conveyed through narration, or in the case of Control, Jesse's conversations with Polaris.
Is the Hiss your enemy? Alright, it's our enemy.
Polaris is an interdimensional being that is connected to Jesse. You never hear Polaris, and you don't have to. It's a device to motivate Jesse talking directly to the player.
If Marshall can't help us with Dylan, he's our next best bet. Assuming he's not dead.
It's a clever device, and the writing of the narration does a pretty good job of slowly unraveling the mystery in a way that lets the player figure things out organically, as opposed to just blatantly telling them what's going on, an issue I had with Remedy's own Alan Wake.
That's enough. Maybe that's too much already. I can't tell her about Dylan and the rest yet.
The other clever thing about the story setup is that by making Jessie the head honcho of a place that is totally alien to her, her new employees have zero issue explaining the ins and outs of everything because, well, it's their job to.
NSC?
Oh, sorry. Bureau jargon. It's what we call the power plant. You know, the big rumbling metal thing?
Not to mention the heaps of case files and documents all around that details the strange work of the FBC, a common video game storytelling device that makes more sense in this game as the FBC is a government body and would have a paper trail of their exploits. Well, as one would hope. Plus, these are actually a lot of fun to read and can be pretty funny too. It's effective world building. When I stepped into this place, it confused me, but by the time the credits rolled, I had a pretty good understanding of why this place was the way it was. I felt like I could make some sense out of the nonsense.
We're in full lockdown. It seems to have spread everywhere and to everyone not protected by an HRA. And, extraordinarily, you.
While the universe of Control is unique, the actual plot itself is pretty typical, being that you're locked in an isolated location that has been invaded by a dangerous supernatural enemy and it's your job to stop it. Raise your hand if you've played a game like that before. Typical doesn't necessarily mean bad though. It's a solidly executed plot with some nice twists and turns here and there that reveal a larger role for Jesse to play.
They shouldn't rely on me. They don't know how I failed people.
The arc of our main character basically boils down to her accepting the role that has been thrust upon her.
They call me the director. But that's not me. I'm not a director type. I'm not a leader.
Personally, I did find her a little hard to connect with for a good portion of the game, but much like the oldest house itself, as the game goes on, you learn more about her in trickles, what her life has been up to this point, and the hardships she's faced.
I've done enough night shift loner jobs to know it makes us come off weird. Ahti the janitor is a friendly face in my book.
And eventually, she did start to grow on me.
Ugh, this place makes me nauseous.
The supporting characters are a different story, a collection of oddball misfits that I was pretty fond of, like the former director Trench and Dr. Darling. Trench, played by James McCaffrey, who was the voice and likeness for Max Payne, and Darling, played by Matthew Peretta, who voiced Alan Wake. Oh boy, the gang's all here. Throughout the game, you learn of these two through informational videos and messages from beyond, an example of Remedy's love for using multimedia in their games, a technique that is successful in further enriching the world of Control.
A temple, a place of worship filled with idols of angry gods. It's all of these, and none of them.
The bizarre tale of Control and the eerie way it's told is probably not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Although for gamers that like an unusual narrative, this is a pretty fun universe to sink your teeth into. If I had a gripe, I think the ending is a little too much of a head scratcher that clearly leaves some things unresolved for the sake of a sequel, which is a little unsatisfying. In all though, while the general plot and character development is adequate, I would say the universe Remedy has created is exceptional. Control is a game where logic and reality is under siege by the absurd and abstract, and Control's visuals reflect that brilliantly. The oldest house in its natural state is cold and dominating, towering gray concrete walls with blaring fluorescence everywhere. Despite the fact that this place defies the laws of physics, there is a sense of logic here, of order. And the choice of characterizing it with mid-century modern furniture and technology from the 1950s is a great touch, further invoking the classic American archetype of the secretive, conspiratorial government agency. You know, Roswell, the Area 51, the FBI, that sort of thing. However, when you encounter the hiss, order becomes chaos. The oldest house contorts and deforms itself in reaction to the hiss's presence, with deep shades of blue and penetrating crimsons representing the hiss's intrusion. This is not a place that is under attack. This is a living being that is fighting an infection, and Remedy has done an amazing job representing that. There's also a sense of style to this game that creates such an effective atmosphere, like walking into a new area and having the name of it pop on screen in bold letters with a little bass to accompany. Ooh, gives me goosebumps. The sound design as well. There's an eerie ambiance to this game, strange otherworldly noises that flutter up here and there while exploring, but also the very experimental atmospheric soundtrack that fits this game like a glove. The environments are also highly destructible. These orderly government halls turn into straight-up battlefields with hunks of debris flying everywhere. Concrete pillars can be decimated, window frames and guardrails will bend and snap, and furniture can splinter and explode into pieces. It's stunning. The detail of the character models is also something to note. Most of the character models are based on the actors that play them, and they are impressively recreated in this game, especially when you see the close-ups of Jessie. Look at her eyebrows. You can see the little hairs just barely popping up from the surface of her skin. Also, her irises. You can see the little strands and patterns in those baby blues. We've definitely come a long way from Max Payne's constipated face. Facial animations are also impressive, and the animators went out of their way to show tiny expressions in characters' faces, although at times it can tread into that uncanny valley territory where things feel a little off, like an over-exaggerated expression here and there. That's just me being picky though. These digital people look incredible nonetheless. When Control was first dropped in 2019, it was an exciting glimpse at what the future held. Its PC release was one of the first games to utilize ray tracing, meaning if you had a powerful enough video card, you could experience incredibly realistic looking lighting effects with an accurate simulation of reflections. However, if you played Control on console, not only was this technique absent, but the game itself ran pretty shaky, with frame rates typically under 30 frames per second, which is what makes this new release for PS5 and Series X exciting, as now console players can experience the game running at a higher resolution with better frame rates and ray tracing. Although there is a tiny catch. Like many console games, Control lets you pick between a performance mode and graphics mode. Both run at 1440p, upscaled to 4K. However, graphics mode runs at 30 frames per second with ray tracing, while performance mode runs at 60 frames per second with no ray tracing. Both these modes' respective frame rates run totally locked, with maybe a minor dip here and there that you will barely register. A locked 30 FPS for graphics is a big improvement over the last gen console release, and the ray tracing looks outstanding. More on that in a second. The silky 60 FPS for performance is an absolute dream, especially since Control's combat can get pretty chaotic. And despite no ray tracing, the lighting and reflections still look great, with exception being a few blown out rooms here and there. So, which mode is better? Well, this one comes down to the preference of the player, because if you ask me, both options are a great way to experience the game, and switching between the modes is fairly quick and painless. For me, I went with performance mode, because while those traced rays nearly broke my jaw from making it drop, for shooters, 60 FPS is something I have to have. And to be honest, in the middle of combat, I'm not thinking about how good the reflections look. Now, despite my preference, I still played some chunks of this game in graphics mode, just so I could show you how incredible this ray tracing tech is. I mean, right at the beginning in the lobby of the oldest house, you can see the difference. Look at how the light shines and reflects on the floor, highlighting all the contours. It's great. The reflections on even the smallest, most mundane assets are so detailed and realistic. Here we have this couch wrapped in plastic. In performance mode, this asset doesn't really stand out. The plastic around this couch has some attempt at a reflection, but ultimately it looks rather unremarkable. Now look at it with ray tracing turned on. The plastic is completely transformed. The material is actually clear with bright highlights reflecting the light around it. This is a super basic asset and it looks incredible. But it's not so much that the reflections look realistic, it's that to me, the ray tracing really tied the graphics together. Everything in the environment felt more grounded, like that coat of varnish that seals everything in. It's a stellar showcase for what this tech can do, and makes me very excited for the coming generation. For me, the appeal of a Remedy game is that you're gonna get a rock-solid third-person shooter with mechanics that are easy to grasp and keep you hooked, and Control does not disappoint. And like past Remedy games, Control's combat comes with a twist. Superpowers. Throughout the course of the story, Jesse will obtain a powerful roster of superhuman abilities, and they are super. One of the first powers you receive is my personal favorite, telekinesis. In the heat of battle, Jessie can pick up whatever object is around her and launch them at her enemies with extreme prejudice. And it is so much fun. While you can aim at and pick up specific objects, if you hold down the telekinesis button, no matter what, something is gonna fly into Jessie's hand, like hunks of concrete from the wall and floor, which looks amazing with the game's physics and destructible environments. Look at how your flung items just tear through the environment. Yeah, awesome. The simple pleasure of grabbing stuff rivals that of Kratos retrieving his axe in God of War. Oh, and you can grab missiles mid-air and chuck them back. It's so fucking cool. I'll be honest with you guys, if the whole game revolved around telekinesis, I'd be perfectly happy. That's how much fun I had with it. But fortunately, the remainder of Jessie's powers are also a lot of fun and useful. You can create a shield of debris to protect yourself, mind control enemies to fight for you, and of course, fly. The least flashy but invaluable of the powers being your dash mechanic. What I appreciate is that all of the powers have their place and value within combat. If you don't use dash when a projectile is coming, you're likely going to get hit. Telekinesis, on top of being generally awesome, is very effective against shields. And there was hardly a situation where I didn't find mind control useful, as the AI is pretty good at killing stuff, whether it be you or its friends. Oop, sorry. Plus, using the shield will save your life when you find yourself in a pickle, and Remedy does a very good job of escalating the combat challenges as you gain these abilities. For example, when you earn the ability to fly, the design of combat arenas begin to open up, lending themselves to aerial dogfights. All of the powers can be upgraded too, and sometimes secondary abilities can be unlocked, like being able to blast out your shield as a weapon or slamming down on an enemy from up in the air. Ability points are needed for the upgrades, which are earned through completing main missions and side missions. Let's go ahead and touch on those.
I see it. Another object of power? They're just standing there, mesmerized by it.
Control has some pretty good side mission game. While exploring the many corners of the oldest house, the player will come across suitably bizarre side quests that involve things like rescuing a ranger from a sector overflowing with clocks, or cleansing a refrigerator that will kill you when you stop looking at it.
I'll come back, I promise.
Okay, just don't forget. I can't stare at this thing much longer.
Often these missions end with a boss fight against some otherworldly being, which makes up some of the game's fiercer challenges. My favorite of the side missions involves stepping into a mirror world and fighting against your doppelganger, appropriately named Isedge. I highly recommend focusing on the side missions when you play, obviously because they're a lot of fun, but also because they do a great job further fleshing out the game's universe. Also, it is very possible to miss out on entire sectors of the oldest house if you just barrel through the story, so heads up on that. Your sole weapon is the service weapon, a supernatural implement that is able to morph into other forms that represent the typical weapon types. You start out with the standard pistol type, referred to as grip, which was my go-to for its solid range and damage. Before long, you earn a shotgun type, shatter, and a machine gun, spin. Later on, you receive types representing a grenade launcher and missile launcher. To be honest, I don't have a lot to say about these weapons because Remedy pretty much nailed them, unsurprising with their years of experience in the genre. They behave as you want them to. Shatter is a beast at close range, and Spin, despite uneven accuracy, will shred a hiss unlucky to be in its way. And they feel great to fire, made even better by the DualSense's adaptive triggers, which might be my favorite advancement in controllers, ever. If I had a nitpick, you're only able to use 2 weapons at a time in combat, which I don't have a problem with, but to switch the weapons out, you always have to access the menu, which can be a pain. I wish there was a way to switch out your loadout during gameplay. I mean, the left and right D-pad buttons are unmapped. I feel like those could have been used for this. Also, I can't say I'm a fan of the mod system. Throughout the game, you can find and equip personal and weapon mods, ranging in level from 1 to 5, with the DLC chapters pushing it up to 6. The mods do basic improvements like giving you more health, making certain powers cost less, or making certain weapons more powerful. And you can definitely get into the weeds of trying to figure out the best build for your character. My first gripe is that you will collect millions of these through the course of the game, often as drops from combat, and your inventory is limited, so it won't be long until you're cleaning out your mods to make room for better ones. And believe me, this happens often and gets old very fast. Yes, I know dismantling a mod gives you materials to buy better ones. That still doesn't change the annoyance of the process. Also, while mods do improve your weapons, I can't say I always found the difference to be that noticeable, but that just might be me. Exploration and Control can be safely compared to that of a Metroidvania, or maybe a Metroidvania Lite. The oldest house is a sprawling, continuous, semi-non-linear place with many hidden nooks and areas locked off until you acquire the necessary power or key. I'm a sucker for Metroidvanias, so having that sort of structure with Remedy's signature gameplay was a pleasure. While exploring, Jesse has to find and cleanse control points, usually involving a large battle against the Hiss. Once a control point is cleansed, it serves as a checkpoint, a place to upgrade, and fast travel, not unlike a bonfire from Dark Souls. What sucks about exploring, though, is the lackluster map system. As much as I like being in the twisty-turny, nonsensical hallways of the oldest house, they can be confusing, and for whatever reason, the game doesn't use a waypoint system to help you. No, you have to pull up the map which indicates where to go, and it's not super helpful. The small print of the many hallways is hard to read and you can't zoom in. And while different shades of color are used to represent different floors, having them stacked on each other only makes things more confusing. You can move while the map is open, which is nice, I guess, but what's the big deal about having waypoints? I could imagine Remedy wanting me to pay more attention to the environmental details to navigate, which I admit I did do, but at the same time, always pulling up some screen-filling map is kind of immersion breaking. To be fair, Polaris will point out where to go in the world, but that's only for story missions. I don't know, this is a silly choice to me, and I'm a little surprised it hasn't been modified in the 2 years since release. Control gives you a lot of freedom and power, but it can also be an unforgiving challenge. Enemies are numerous and bloodthirsty, and there's basically no health regeneration. This is the type of game where if you let your guard down, you can be easily blindsided by a projectile that can wipe out 90% of your health. Initially, sticking to cover can be beneficial, but as you gain more powers, your best defense is to stay twitchy and on the move, which is refreshing considering most third-person shooters these days are more on the stop and pop side of things. It can get frustrating, and if it's one note I have, it's that I wish projectiles were telegraphed a little more. This totally might be a me thing, so take this as you will, but when combat got real chaotic and my attention was split in multiple directions, the white arrows indicating incoming projectiles weren't super noticeable to me, leading to some sudden, cheap-feeling deaths. This might be a get good type of problem, but couldn't we have those white arrows flash red? Another annoyance I had with the game was the checkpoint system. When you die, you return to a control point, which is not that big of a deal. But where it gets silly is with any event type scenario in the game, boss fights in particular. If you die in a boss fight, you return to the control point, having to retraverse to the boss fight and sometimes rewatch any story material associated with it. Can't I just respawn right here at the fight? Do I have to redo this stuff over and over? And once again, these are difficult fights. There's a good chance you're gonna die several times in a row. Where this is at its silliest is in a major combat scenario later in the game, where you have to fight enemies on these 3 towers. When you clear the enemies off of a tower, the game does save, protecting your progress. But if you die, you still have to start at the control point and run and fly your way back to the baddies that killed you. It's an unnecessary waste of time. I feel like this was done to give players the chance to go elsewhere and level up, so to speak, if they happen to be underpowered for the battle. But couldn't you just put a return to control point option in the menu just for these particular scenarios? Okay, enough complaining. Overall, despite some gripes here and there, gameplay in Control is pretty damn good. In fact, in my opinion, I think this is the best combat system Remedy has designed to date. Granted, I have yet to play Quantum Break, so that opinion could change if I ever get around to that game. But either way, this is a team that has once again proven that they are masters at creating fun, easy to grasp, and challenging third-person combat. And with this game, they exceeded my expectations. Remedy did not miss a beat with Control. Their signature third-person combat shines with the inclusion of superpowers, which is minorly speed bumped by a few annoyances. While the story didn't blast me through the back of my seat, I found it engaging nonetheless, with a bizarre but captivating universe full of interesting characters. Not to mention, the game is gorgeous and does an excellent job showing off the benefits of ray tracing. If you're a longtime Remedy fan who hasn't gotten around to this yet, you're in for a treat. If you're looking for a rock-solid, action-packed third-person shooter, this is definitely one to check out. And if you already own Control on a last-gen console, the improvements here are certainly night and day, although whether or not you think that's worth buying the game again, I leave to you. Please be sure to let me know in the comments your thoughts on Control, and if you're a Remedy fan, let me know what your favorite Remedy game is. For me, Max Payne will always hold a special place in my heart. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to subscribe, like, and share with your friends. It is a massive, seriously massive help for this channel. Interested in more of the Remedy catalog? Be sure to check out my video on Alan Wake. I post videos weekly, so be sure to ring that bell so you're the first to see them. I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.